Shalom, y'all. It is late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. We are here for our Secret Midnight Sermons. This is our Secret Teachings of Jesus series where I have been delving into the Nag Hammadi scriptures. I was really curious about the Gnostic Gospels and I wanted to read them, and I didn't know when I'd have time. So I thought I'd start doing this on Saturday nights where we would share them together and read them for the first time. So what I do is I open up, we've been in the Gospel of Philip for the last several months. I open up, I pick a passage that's standing out to me, and I read it a couple of times before I start the video, and then I'll read it to you a couple of times, and then we'll go through and unpack it, and we'll see what kind of downloads and impressions that I'm getting. I'm not a theologian or anything, but I do pick up on certain Kabbalistic references and things because I've always been, interested in things like that. So, yeah, this is just for fun. So don't, you can take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, so we are currently in the Gospel of Philip, and it's like these portions of this cryptic text that you kind of have to mull over. And so there are benefits to studying late at night. This is just kind of a caveat that I give every Saturday, just in case you're joining for the first time. But to be awake at midnight and be doing spiritual work or ritual work or anything like that is very powerful, because midnight is a liminal space between the end of one thing and the beginning of another thing. And so the veil is very thin in that realm. And so there's we're closer to spirit, and we get a more direct connection with the light. However, that energy can be very powerful when we get a very direct connection. It's like getting a jolt of electricity, a surge, a power surge. So we have to ground that power surge and ground it into our energy bank and into our consciousness. And so what usually follows is a period of earning, right? You may go through a period where you have to embody this wisdom in your life by acting out or playing it out, in a situation. Or you might have, a little bit of chaos that happens that has to evolve you, right, into, stepping into these shoes. So, yes, so the thing about midnight is that if you study late at night, you are sort of embraced in what's called surrounding light. And that's the part of the soul that is the most elevated and the most high. And so it is a very protective energy around you. So that is active at this time of night, and it kind of shields you from having to go through a chaotic process to ground what you've learned during that time. All right, so the portion that we're going to talk about this week is called The Forces. There are forces that do favors for people. They do not want people to come to salvation, but they want their own existence to continue. For if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop, and animals will not be offered up to the forces. In fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals. I'm going to say that again. In fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals. The animals were offered up alive, and after being offered, they died. But a human being was offered up to God dead, and the human being came alive. I'm going to read that again through, because I always read the first time poorly. And then there's a bunch of footnotes, so I'm going to read the footnotes and then we'll get into it. Okay, the forces. There are forces that do favors for people. They do not want people to come to salvation, but they want their own existence to continue. For if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop, and animals will not be offered up to the forces. In fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals. and the animals were offered up alive. And after being offered, they died. So the animals were offered up alive, and after they were offered, they died. But a human being was offered up to God dead, and the human being came alive. Okay, so there are forces. In Gnostic texts, the forces are among the rulers of this world. Here they are identified with the ancient gods and goddesses to whom the sacrifices were made. So in this portion, they're referring to old gods and goddesses. What comes to mind to me are the Greek and Romans, maybe even Celtic. But in Kabbalah, the idea is that, so there's the 10 luminous emanations on the tree of life, the 10 dimensions of consciousness. And so during one of the dimensions is when the pureness of the wholeness of the light gets diffracted into categories and personalities. And so within this dimension, all of the gods and the stories of the gods and the myths are held in the collective subconscious as truth on an archetypal level, on a mythical level, on a mystic level. So these gods and goddesses represent different aspects of the personality of God, but on a lower level, closer to human form. Like God in his full divinity and wholeness has no has a pure consciousness, and the old gods did not. They had personality flaws. They had egos that could get in the way. So they were a lower form. But when you start at the highest form on the tree, the highest spirit is Keter. So this is the seed level of this reality, right? This is the primordial point, the singularity, the big bang that broke into existence for us to be in. And so when that first point of light comes through, it's all powerful. It's all encompassing. It hasn't been diluted yet through these different filtrations of these different dimensions as the light moves down the tree of light and finally to Malchut, which is earth, which is the universe, which is the physical realm where we have our being and we are housed and we are what lives in us. You know, we're in this this physical world, but it extends into the multiverses, right? It's not just here on earth that we're talking about. Although Malchut is associated with the idea of earth, the human kingdom, beyond just like more specifically than just the physical whole. Okay, so there are forces. So the forces are the Roman gods, the Greek gods, the Celtic gods, the Hindu gods, the Native American gods, like all of these gods that are important to these different ethnicities or groups. I can't think right now. It's been a very long day. It's like they represent an aspect of the one God, right? So they're not exactly separate. They're representative, but it's just of this one piece of God. They become anthropomorphized, so that we can have a grasp to understand about God and who God is in context to us and how we relate, right? Because God itself, himself, herself, they, themselves, it's both masculine and feminine and neutral column all combined. So it's God, like in its purest form, is so abstract that we can't even wrap our mind around it. So it has to come down in these different levels for us to understand and work with and and glean from, right? I mean, even though I don't think that I'm praying to Zeus or like getting actual help from, like, say, Aphrodite, I do learn lessons, and I see things, I make relations and associations, and I see the symbolism there, and that teaches me and shows me and demonstrates things to me. It's easier because they're characterized into people, and so we can relate to those stories, and we can see how they can apply to us as well. So these forces, there are forces, and they're talking about the old gods. All the categorized, gods of each, ethnic myth. So there are forces that do favors for people. They do not want people to come to salvation, but they want their own existence to continue. And these forces can also lap over into, like, the supernatural forces, forces that people would make sacrifices to. So that could include evil forces even. But it would be the governing forces of the material realm, which, a lot of the material realm is governed by the opponent. That this is the opponent's realm. The opponent is the prince of the material world, right? The limited material world, the illusion, the world of illusion. So these forces do favors for people. They can help people out, and they do that because the opponent gets involved, and it tricks you so that you don't fall into your path into elevating your soul, right? Because we're taking raw material from the side of the dark, like we see my scales, right? When we do the spiritual alchemy, when we do that soul elevation, that soul work, we're taking density and darkness, and we are alchemizing it and turning that into light. So we are breaking down those layers of negativity around our soul, and we're revealing more light of the Creator, and we're elevating sparks of light for the side of good. And so that puts more weight on the side of good, of mercy, of love, of the light. If we short circuit or lose our consciousness, or reach for instant gratification, or receive for the self alone, then those sparks are going back over to the side of the dark. So sometimes the forces will trick us with things that seem good, or things that we want, or things that will lead us in a direction that will prevent us from actually revealing sparks of light and taking power away from them and putting it back into the side of light, right? They want people to be serving them. These forces like to feed off of our emotional energy, whether that be lust, excitement, pride, fear, shame, guilt, all of this energy that we put out. There's like these energetic vampires and these succubi and incubi that feed off of this energy. And so the forces will scratch your back if you're scratching theirs. You're their food source. So they're going to try to help you go towards the wrong direction so that you won't be going in the right direction. It's going to take power away from them. They do not want people to come to salvation, but they want their own existence to continue. They don't want to lose their food supply. For if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop, and animals will not be offered up to the forces. So there's another, no, that was the verse number. Okay. So people used to, well, I guess they still do, but ritual sacrifice. When you slaughter an animal in the name of a sacrifice, you have to kill the animal. I'm demonstrating slitting its throat, or however you have to do this. You're releasing the life force of that beast as a sacrifice, and you're redirecting that life force into what you are trying to manifest. And so that life force could be intercepted by one of the forces, and used for evil and darkness. And they take that, and they take that energy, and they feed off of it. There are also positive ritual sacrifices that are for the elevation of the light. But many times those sacrifices are given to the side of the dark because we're putting our negativity into this thing, and we are throwing it to the dogs to keep them busy and off our back. So it's a matter of cleansing and throwing away your waste. But and yeah, so when people do these sacrifices, the forces feed off of this energy, and they're grown by it. And as long as you're continuing to, have that relationship where you're feeding them and you're supplying them with their supply, they're going to continue to supply you with your supply. So, yes, for if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop and animals will not be offered up. Now, I had just watched a video recently where an interesting rabbi was talking about how animal sacrifice is good for the animal. Because, so like when we eat from, like the mineral kingdom breaks down and it feeds the plant kingdom. And the mineral kingdom is the least alive of the four kingdoms. There's the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom. The speaking kingdom is what it's called. So when the minerals break down in the soil, it feeds the plants. And when those minerals are broken down and torn apart and fed to something that is of a higher level of life force, a higher level of consciousness, then that former form is then elevated too. And so by becoming the sacrifice for the plant, the mineral kingdom is now elevated higher than it would have been. It becomes part of the plant. The plant kingdom is less alive than the animal kingdom. And so the animal kingdom must feed off of the grass in order to grow their life force. So the plant kingdom is honored to be sacrificed by the the plant kingdom is honored to be sacrificed by the animal kingdom, because their consciousness and their energy and all of that is being elevated when they become one with the animal, right? They are being elevated and evolved as becoming part of this animal. So now the animal is actually happy to be sacrificed for the sake of the human being, because the human being has more life force and consciousness and energy and soul direction than the animal, right? So when the animal dies, it's like it's fulfilling its purpose and it's being absorbed by the human so that its consciousness is elevated and it can become elevated. So for if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop and animals will not be offered up to the forces. So if people come to salvation, their sins, mistakes, weaknesses, tikkun, correction, when people come to salvation, when they have the union with Mashiach, the Messiah, with the Christ consciousness within, they no longer need to make sacrifices to try to appease, to try to get forgiveness, to try to barter, to try to buy your, way into better favor or better energy, because you've been crucified. All of it has been crucified within you and redeemed, died, and been reborn. So it's like you, as your consciousness is elevated, you've sacrificed yourself, right? The layers of the ego that have to fall away. It's like we go through these cycles where we allow that to die, but we put it on the cross and we sacrifice that. There are forces that do favors for people. They do not want people to come to salvation. So it's like when you have salvation, you become awakened, and awakened to a cosmic truth that you did not have access to previously. And it changes the way that you perceive things, and it changes the way that you take things in. And so salvation wipes your slate clean, and it helps you can invite a feeling of inner peace in, and you can grow that in serenity, peace, and joy and love. And you can start cultivating these things with salvation, because you are forgiven. You are no longer lost or purposeless, right? You have salvation because you're paying attention to your soul, and you're doing that soul work of the soul correction, of the elevation, of the ascension. For if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop, because you won't be looking outside of yourself for power, because the power comes from the source from within, which is creator, which is that highest life force, right? You're drawing on the direct source from the light, from within the heart, not looking outside in the limited material world to break a little thing open to take some out. For if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop, because it'll be like so pointless. It'll be like, what's the use? Power, it's barely anything. I have direct connection with the light of the creator. And animals will not be offered up to the forces. Because why? Why would we need to? We can go directly to the light of the creator and tap into that source for myself. I don't need to sacrifice an animal to do that. Now, the tools are great. They're good to do, to have a process that you participate in. And the tools do help. And if you do, like for instance, during Rosh Hashanah, there is a whole thing called Tishlet or Tishlik. I'm a self-taught Jew, okay? But you basically take bread and you put your sins in that and your shortcomings and the things that you want to change, and you cast it into a body of water. Another form of doing this is also sacrificing a ritual chicken or goat. And so there are reasons for that. There are reasons for the specific animals as well, that they have a certain level of consciousness. So, and then they're associated with different like astrological like energies and energies that are relevant in that window of time. So, but yeah, once you have this salvation, you don't, like everything else is just a bonus. You don't need it. You're connecting directly from the source. From the Christ within. The Christ is like, it opens that bridge of your heart up to where you have like this connection with the Holy Spirit and with divine guidance and help all around you. In fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals. Now, going back to talking about the consciousness levels of the four kingdoms. Animals don't have free will. They're completely running on instinct. hungry, fearful, competitive, mating now, need to make baby. Like, animals are instinctual. They're reactive. They operate from their lower base needs and wants. They don't have self-control or the ability to delay gratification or to practice patience or consciousness, right? They're being reactive all the time. I mean, look at a dog. Oh, I smell something. Can I sit here and stare at you until you give me some? Like, I will do anything for food. Please. Oh, I can't take it. Give me my food. Oh, give me a bite. Like, it's an animal, you know? Oh, an animal. Oh, let me smell your butt. Now I'm going to hump you. It's an animal. I'm afraid. I'm going to snap at you and I'm going to bite and I'm going to latch on and I'm going to attack because I'm afraid, or I'm going to run. I'm going to hide, right? Very reactive. It's animal consciousness. So as people, as human beings, we have the divine inheritance of a higher consciousness. We can elevate up to Christ consciousness within this incarnation, this life, this realm. So, but that takes transcendence on our part. It takes process. And then we all come in at different levels, right? But if we do no work on ourselves, most of the population is going through life in an animal state of consciousness. Because it's only when we can slow down and have control over our reactive nature, when we can say no to our self-defeating tendencies, when we can slow ourselves from reaching for that instant gratification, or stop ourselves from trying to make everything okay and fix everything. That is being in reactor consciousness. And so until we can pause and say, okay, this is an opportunity from the Creator, and there's a message here. And I don't need to get lost in the story, but I do need to connect to the message. The message that is going to build and expand my soul, not break it down, not shrink it or keep it constricted. So the animal consciousness acted out in a person is like, oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to eat it. I'm going to eat anything in sight. I'm stressed out. I need to do something about it. Oh my God. I'm angry. I'm going to lash out and I'm going to like tell this person what I really think. I'm horny. I need to go like hook up with someone now. I'm lonely. I want to connect. I need intimacy. I don't care who it is. I just need a warm body. Like, those are like decisions that are very common, that we've all done. We've all made those at some point, because we are coming from a reactive state and we have no self-control and no awareness, and we're just reaching out of default setting, right? Or reacting out of default setting. And we're not using our divine inheritance of free will in those moments. We're not choosing with consciousness. We are reacting in default setting. And so to be able to start practicing self-control and self-mastery and cultivating what's going on up in your head, inside your mind all the time, cultivating what's in your heart and what's blocking your heart and what's on your heart. So to those who the sacrifices were made were animals. This is what I wanted to say about that after I explained how people are mostly operating in animal consciousness until they become awakened and start practicing slowing down enough to be in at least human consciousness, let alone like, demi-divine consciousness, right? Because we as human beings are equally divine as we are human. We have the potential to be divine, fully divine, but yet at the same time be fully human, just like Jesus was when he walked this earth, being able to perform miracles, but also being the Son of Man. Okay, so when it says here, in fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals. If you look back, the gods were always like either rewarding people or they were punishing them. The gods are the forces that they're talking about here. Like, oh, if you're going to sacrifice this to the gods and hope that they reward you, well, they'll also get pissed off at you and punish you as well. And so they're conditional. They're not eternal. They're not unwavering. They're from an animal consciousness. They're reactive. They're so ego-driven. You know, you read all the myths and you remember those stories. And it's not that they didn't have their heroic moments, and it's not that we didn't learn lessons, but they were usually called like cautionary tales, honestly. And so, but they're not all the way up to like fully divine, consciousness level. Not even Christ consciousness level. Like the gods, the old gods are not as high on in the tree of life as the Christ center. So they are not unconditional love. They are not unwavering. They are not unchanging. And they are not even in a state of cause consciousness. They are in a state of effect consciousness. And so things are very precarious when you're dealing with that kind of Lord and Master, right? Which makes us ask ourselves in this physical realm, who are we making our Lord and Master? Is it something or someone or some idea that is less than the fullness of source, of creator? Are we putting our devotion into idle vessels, right? Empty vessels that, aren't going to give us the full fulfillment, because what we really want is the light of the creator, right? So, yes, let's see. In fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals. The animals were offered up alive, and after being offered up, they died. So literally they're like, okay, the animals, like in the realm where you are in the physical, sacrificing physical animals to the forces, it's like you're using the material world and thinking that there's power in it. And you're misguided there, because the real power is in the non-material world. And so the animals were offered up alive, and after being offered, they died. And so the curse of this realm is death, right? That's the downside. That's the cost. The cost of this, the wages of sin is death, right? So the cost of trying to look to these physical things to save you is death. It's a dead end every time. The animals were offered up alive, and after being offered, they died. So it's like when you're offering these things and you're trying to give to something that's not really divine, it's not really God, it's just these lower forces, these lower, lesser things, all that comes to you in the end is death, right? And to appease one of these lesser gods, it's like you have to kill, which is evil, which is dark, which is destroyer consciousness. However, but a human being, perhaps humankind in general is the footnote, but a human being was offered up to God dead, and the human being came alive. And so what that is saying, okay, when we offer ourselves to the sacrifice, as the sacrifice, when we offer ourselves as the lamb to the slaughter, to divine, to God, we come dead, we come unanimated, we come asleep. But when we offer ourselves up to God in sacrifice, that means, oh my gosh, I'm waking up and I'm sacrificing the shells of my ego that keep me in this state of sleep, this state of illusion, the state of believing that the material is the power, and I'm putting my faith in the material, and I'm trying to suck fulfillment from the material, but it's also fleeting, and it's also decaying, and it's all death, right? But when we offer our ego, right, that side of us that identifies with this dead nourishmentless, empty whatever, this candy, essentially, it's junk food. When we put our faith in that, it doesn't return anything. All it does is fail us every time, and we're left depleted, and we're left like having reached for a high and then crashed harder than we ever were to begin with. But when we offer ourselves up dead, right? I'm not dead. I'm dead. I'm not fully alive, right? Because I'm not living in my awakened state yet. I'm not ascending in my soul. But when we offer that part of ourselves up, those ego shells that die off, we're revealing all of this light and this power. And so that is bringing us to life. That's when we're resurrected, when our soul starts emanating through, transcending through our immanence, right? It's pushing out, it's radiating out through our human flaws and weaknesses. And that's when we come alive, when we're animated. So the forces. There are forces that do favors for people. They do not want people to come to salvation, but they want their existence to continue. For if people come to salvation, sacrifice will stop, and animals will not be offered up to the forces. In fact, those to whom sacrifices were made were animals, and animals were offered up alive, and after being offered, they died. But a human being was offered up to God, and the human being came alive. All right, you guys, the human being offered up, and the human being came alive. So when we offer ourselves up for that soul death, for that soul correction, for that ego death, it actually brings us back to life. It's a resurrecting process. And it's funny too, because anytime we die to that negativity, how good do you feel? How good do you feel the next day, right? When you start getting over like a breakup, have that feeling when you're like, oh, you're so miserable for so long, you're in so much pain, and then suddenly one day you realize that you're not miserable anymore. And then you feel really good. It's like when you notice it, you're like, oh my God, this feels amazing. I'm alive. Like, and you're like, I feel good again. I can laugh again. Like that's what it's like. All right, you guys, I can barely stay awake. My eyes are getting heavy. I'm like literally about to fall asleep. But I hope that y'all have a good day tomorrow. I am going to be crawfish boiling with my family. My sister and her wife are throwing a big boil. I will try if I can. Probably won't have time because I got to be there by the afternoon. But if I get to, I will do our energy oracle forecast before the boil. If not, I will probably be drunk and tired tomorrow when I am doing our video. So prepare for that. It's funny. My friend said, no matter what, you always need to get these done. And I'm like, yeah, because I'll come in late and I'll do them. Even if I'm like tipsy, I'll still do the video. Because it's now, I feel like when you push yourself out of your comfort zone and like you break the flesh and the spirit of Eucharist, it reveals even more light. And when you don't feel like doing something and you're not like wanting to do it, you're not excited about it, that's when it actually counts, because then you're really doing it for the Creator and you're not just getting a hit of energy for yourself, for your own selfish reasons. So I know that the more tired I am and the less I feel like doing these videos on those days, those are the most important. you know. And I mean, usually I have a really fun time and I love doing them. So I usually don't dread doing them at all, but sometimes I am really tired and I don't feel like talking. But once I get going, it gets going. I'm fizzling out. All right, y'all, be good, but not too good. Ciao.